Hi, I'm Craig Schaefer. Welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Mike Zambotti joins us today. He is assistant professor of cybersecurity at St. Francis University and also an adjunct lecturer of cybersecurity at Utica College. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Greg, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time, and it's good to be here. I've listened to your show, and it's good to be on the other side of the show right now.
Well, if you've listened, you know how I'm going to start this out. We'd love to hear a bit about your career, how you got started in this wonderful security field, and just kind of take us through how you got started. I know at one point in time, I know you were actually, I believe, a virtual CIO, and so there's obviously a lot of tie-ins to the virtual CISO world there, and just bring us through to what eventually led you to being an instructor full time.
Oh yeah. I think I've had a pretty awesome journey. At least, I consider it awesome. It's mine. So I was one of those kids way back in the day. They used to break things. How does this thing work? I'd get something, a toy or something from my parents. Basic computer devices, and it's like, well, what makes this thing work? Okay, and then it would break. I'm like, hey, mom, that thing you got me is broken, so better fix it. And I had that, I think, that line of thinking towards technology. And then, I got interested in the stock market. So I was like, wow, the stock market's really cool. My dad used to have me read the stock pages. I was the kid reading the stock. I was like Alex P. Keaton, if you watched Family Ties.
You're dating yourself there.
Exactly, right. So, reading the stock page. So I majored in finance and I went to Penn State University and majored in finance. I worked as a financial advisor for about 10 years. And then about a little over a decade ago, I said, this cybersecurity thing is getting big. And I said, this is going to become a thing. So I got my master's degree from Utica University in cybersecurity and intelligence, and I moved over to the cyber field. As a financial advisor, I work with clients, and then it was a natural fit to work as a VCIO, as a client CIO with an MSP. Okay, so I worked with companies and the client relationship, and then rather than talking about finances, talking about the security and technology side of the house. So I really liked the Utica program. I loved what they did there. I thought it was an awesome program whenever I went through it. And I kept bugging them. I said, hey, how can I be involved? I want to stay. I want to keep my Utica EDU email address. So they finally took pity on me and said, okay, well, you can be a TA for a class. So I really like that. And then somebody said, hey, do you want to take this class? So I took an online class, and I really liked the instructor side of things. So I did that for several years, and eventually I made the move full time to St. Francis University. So I'm currently an assistant professor of cybersecurity at St. Francis, and I teach at Utica online, which I love. I love working with the students. I love seeing people start their journeys and help them launch their journey into cybersecurity. And I heard a quote once. I can't remember who said it, but it said the first third of your career, you learn, and then you earn, and then you return. I'm still in the earning process, but not independently wealthy. That'd be nice, but I want to return as well. I want to help people. So I feel very strongly about the instructor side of things, and then also volunteering, meeting people, getting them into the industry.
I know we talked briefly before starting the recording about being an instructor, and I'd mentioned that I was an adjunct for a bit as well too. And there's an awful lot of satisfaction of giving back with teaching. But I also know that, at least from my perspective, there's challenges as well too. It's not. I think sometimes people think that teaching in general is easier. It looks a lot easier than it really is.
Mm-hmm.
What's one of the challenges that you face as being an instructor in the cybersecurity arena?
Well, you know what? It's funny. My first challenge, I remember my first day of teaching in person. I'd mostly been teaching online, and then whenever I was teaching in person, 4 classes, they're each an hour and 15 minutes. At the end of the day, I was exhausted. I was like, wow, I'm not used to standing here for like all this time.
There's a lot more energy involved again, I think, than the people realize.
Right. And everybody's looking at you thinking, and you can't mail it in. You're there, you're orchestrating things, you're running things, and they're depending on you. So yeah, it's one of those things that it looks easier than said than done, but it's definitely, it's fun. But yes, like anything else, there's challenges because you're dealing with a wide array of students, and how students learn. And I think connecting with students on how they learn, and you can look at that as, I draw from my experiences working with clients, both the financial services and the CIO side of things, is everybody's different. And it really, we hear this, we hear soft skills a lot. We hear, communication, but it really is true. I think a lot of problems can be solved by communication, people talking, people, maybe not texting or emailing, but actually physically talking. I think that helps, and connecting with students and figuring out, hey, how does this student learn? It's so different than how this student learns. How can I resolve that? How can I make sure that both of them have a great experience? And on the client side, same thing. How does this client interacts this way? This one interacts this way. How do we make sure that we're giving everybody the best possible experience?
Yeah, and I think that that's a great point that we often talk about on the podcast here about the soft skills that are needed in all levels of cybersecurity and information security, and actually seeing that or being exposed to that as a student, they may not realize that they're being exposed to learning soft skills in addition to learning things about ethics and cybersecurity and risk management and all that fun stuff. But they actually are. So that's good. I'm glad to hear that you're incorporating that into your field. You've been, though, prior to that, working with small and mid-sized businesses as a virtual CIO. If I remember correctly, you mentioned that you were doing that for several years. Mm-hmm. So you've got a unique perspective. That combined with the academic educational aspect, from your perspective, what's one or a few of the more critical threats to information security that small and mid-sized businesses face today?
There's plenty. There's no shortage, which is why our business exists and why it continues to grow. Mm-hmm. I would say the big one that really is maybe not so much emerging, but already happening, is vendor risk management. Mm. We can look at things, as a small and medium-sized business, we can have our house in order. Okay, we can be, an A+ student with our cybersecurity program, but we're not on an island. With the interconnectedness right now of industry, every company, regardless of the size, is probably using some sort of cloud resource or platform, and somebody else has your data. And it's really incumbent on companies to understand, well, hey, our house is good, but what about these 5 other vendors? Our accountant, our attorneys, our payroll, they have our data. Are they being good stewards of our data as well? A couple years ago, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, UPMC, in Pittsburgh, they had a security incident. And it wasn't necessarily them that had the incident. Somebody had emailed documents to a third party. I believe it was their accountant. The accountant had a breach of their email system. The files were in the email, and the attackers were able to view those files and access them. So I think that highlights the third party risk. And because it goes down to, even back a decade plus, Target.
Right.
We still talk about the Target breach, which was the Phasio Mechanical Services breach. Actually, it was the HVAC company.
I always forget the name, but yes, and they were in Pennsylvania, I think, right?
Yeah, to bring everything full circle, the way I drive to work at St. Francis, which is in the middle of central Pennsylvania, Loretto, PA. Every once in a while, I'll pass a Phasio Mechanical Services truck, because they're based out of Pittsburgh, it's just funny. It's like, hey, I just.
I do think about Target, right?
Yeah. Right. But yeah, I think that's a big risk, a big challenge right now for businesses, is that third party vendor risk management and understanding, hey, we're going to ask for a SOC 2, but are we going to be able to interpret it? What if we're small, we're a 10 lawyer firm. We got the SOC 2 from our MSP. Well, do we have the tools to be able to analyze that and really understand that, yes, this company will be good stewards, a good partner with us?
Well, that's a good point, because a lot of times working with small and mid-sized businesses, you probably saw this as well too, that they'll go out and they'll do their due diligence. They'll go out, they'll request the SOC 2 from a vendor that's providing those types of services. They'll get it. They'll either check the box that says that they've gotten the SOC 2 and then that's it, or sometimes they'll go a little bit further and actually look through and read to see if it's a qualified or unqualified opinion. But that's about it. And I don't think that there's really that much more that many SMBs put into this, that they consider that not so much third-party risk management, but they consider that more like compliance risk management. We have to do this because somebody says we have to do this. from your experience, what's one way that maybe businesses can understand a little bit more that they have to do more, that it goes beyond that just because you've given your data to this business and they have a SOC 2 attestation, that doesn't absolve you of being responsible for the security of that information.
Right, absolutely. And I think it's important for the business to understand that they will always be accountable for their customers and their employees' data, regardless if it's a breach at the partner, something goes wrong with the supply chain, like we saw with Colonial Pipeline or many of the other supply chain attacks, even CrowdStrike, which was not a cyber attack, but it was a supply chain issue in that there was a common cause for many, many systems being down, millions of systems being down. So, and that goes back to the interconnectedness. Everything is connected. We saw that with the financial system back in the financial crisis back in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. We saw the interconnectedness can be a positive sometimes, but then also a negative. So I think it's important for small businesses to really consider who they're working with, evaluate each partner on a regular basis. I'm not saying every week you need to, go reevaluate all your relationships, but have a regular meeting with them. If you work with an MSP or an MSSP, make sure that you're getting all you can out of the relationship. Make sure you're sitting down with them, going over things, and that they're a valued partner, that you're using them for the services that you're paying for. Because honestly, I've seen that a lot where organizations will engage with an MSP and really not leverage that relationship. Some MSP relationships can be tremendously valuable. And I saw that firsthand. I saw the company I worked for have tremendously valuable relationships with our clients. And, I think it goes back to communication. It goes back to also shopping around. You don't want to tie in. You don't want to get a vendor lock-in and say, we're with them forever. You want to have a good relationship, but also, see what else is out there and have conversations and see, well, what are these companies bringing to the table? So nobody gets complacent.
So let me flip the question a little bit. And Target is actually one of the ones that a lot of people will use as an example for this. But yes, the main focus of Target was third-party HVAC vendor breach back in 2013 late. A lot of news about it, and you can even go back now and still find the news on it. And there's a lot of attention paid on Target not doing proper third-party vendor risk management. And the same thing happens today, or earlier this year, or maybe it was last year. I don't remember. I think it was last year. Bank of America, same type of deal. Bank of America breach, and a lot of the press was all about how Bank of America was not performing their third-party risk management correctly. But I would submit that part of the problem that we have in the industry is, yes, that's an issue, but the root cause is that your HVAC vendor or your other third-party vendor, that they had a problem with their security program. How can we as an industry potentially try to fix that, fix the security posture of the vendor themselves?
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough one. In the case of Target, as far as I understood the issue, the network was, once the attackers got access, it was very easy to navigate and go from the HVAC system over to the POS devices. So there was not proper segmentation in line. So I guess that would go back to taking care of everything in your own house. But yeah, are you going to ask your vendors if you can do a pen test on them or have a pen test done? Maybe not paid for by them, but maybe paid for by the organization that's hiring them. Okay. Are you going to require cyber insurance? I've seen that a lot, and I've seen cyber insurance applications get a lot more involved. They're almost becoming like mini vulnerability assessments themselves.
Yeah, and they kind of have to, because cyber insurers, I mean, they literally have money in the game. They want to see the small business succeed. And I think that's a great thing, because that is one of the positive pushes to help with the small and mid-sized business security. I think there's some things that can be done in that arena, but it seems like to me, because you mentioned Target, and Target being 12 years ago, it seems to me that not much has changed. And why do you think that is?
Well, we learn lessons slowly. Sometimes organizations and people learn lessons best by experience. I tell my students, one of my quotes is, Smart people learn from their own mistakes, but wise people learn from the mistakes of others. And we lead into tabletop exercises. Whenever we go into that, we talk about, hey, we can get things really, really wrong in a tabletop exercise. We can have a complete disaster and nothing happens to our production network. So I think doing that, having that as a philosophy within the organization, you think about the SANS PICRL model for incident response, the planning, identification, and containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned of the incident response process. I really like the P and the L. It's the planning stage, the left of boom. It's before things happen. Are we completely okay with everything? Because as a STEAM philosopher Mike Tyson says, right, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
So our best plans, hey, we could have the best incident response plan ever. It's on our file server, which just got ransomwared. Okay, what's plan B? Do we have a copy of it anywhere else? Do we have access to it? Do we have access to email? Really running simulations, running tabletops, understanding what can happen. And you mentioned cyber insurance, and I think that's a great concept. And cyber insurance is another one that's really come a long way with things like breach coaches. And you're right, they do have skin in the game. They are sitting on the same side of the table as you. They want the incident to be as contained as possible. They have resources. So I think it's important for small businesses to develop those relationships with their cyber insurance company beyond we send you a check every year and you give us insurance. Talk whatever resources exist. Contact your local FBI office. Talk to the somebody so that, hey, if I ever need a connection, I'm not calling 1-800-FBI because we have a ransomware attack. I'm going to do a report online, but actually have a person, contact the person, say, hey, let's get coffee sometime. We're a local business. We would love to connect with you. What resources does the FBI have as far as stopping ransomware, which they have a lot online, and maybe they have even more that they can provide locally. So building those relationships beforehand, before you need, it goes back to dig your well before you're thirsty, build your network before you need it.
And the FBI is so much enthusiastic about doing this. I love telling the story of how I met now retired cyber agent Scott Augenbaum. He's been on the program before. I was CISO for Nashville Metropolitan Government of Davidson County and got the message that the FBI wanted to see us. This is, I guess this would be 14 years ago. And I had no idea why. I was fairly new to the environment there. It kind of freaked me out a little bit. Why does the FBI want to see us? But so him and his one of his colleagues came and basically presented to our executive leadership team, like state of the threat, if you will. And as I was going through that briefing, I understood where they were coming from, but they were trying to create those relationships because, as Scott later told me, that they get as much out of that. The more that they can establish the relationships, then they get those channels for information. So don't think that asking the FBI to meet with you, that's going to be a burden on them. They want to, because now that helps with their information collecting as well. You also mentioned about breach coaching, and that's interesting with regards to cyber insurance, because that has become something that is more and more important. I've done breach coaching for one cyber insurer as a volunteer. But my experience from that is that I don't think people are taking advantage about with that as much as well too. To your point, there's so much out there that it could be.
There's a lot of free resources. Absolutely. And that's, companies balk at spending a lot of times, let's have a budget, but there's so many free things out there to take it. And it's just a matter of finding them and taking the time to invest in it with a non-monetary investment.
I know CISA does as well too, and hopefully that won't be affected by the reductions in force. But they've got some excellent programs up there for small and mid-sized businesses. And one of the things that CISA does, getting back to one other thing you said, is that they run tabletop exercises. I know you mentioned that, and it pinged a question in my head that I have to ask. Do you actually teach your students about tabletops, and do you go through tabletop exercises?
Absolutely. Yes, we do. And I love that you mentioned the CISA ones, because we use that. We use their packet. They have those. CIS has them. There's a couple others that we will take, and we'll run through it, and we'll talk to them and say, well, how would you respond? and what questions would you bring up? And it's nice to hear somebody that's maybe not even in the field. Maybe they bring something up that somebody that's, blinders on a little bit, focused on, getting those extra opinions. But yeah, we run tabletops, and then I actually have students design their own tabletop. And with injects, we want to make sure that, hey, hey, Greg is our incident responder head, and he runs everything and he knows everything. But hey, Greg's on vacation, so Greg, you're just going to sit over in the corner for this one because you're on vacation and you're unreachable. So are we cross-trained? Is somebody else able to take that position?
I think that's great, because I think that the more that folks are exposed to the concept of tabletops, even if they end up not ultimately pursuing a cyber path, they understand the rationale and the reasonings for it. Because one of the many struggles that I have running tabletops in real time for SMBs is sometimes you get people in there and they really just consider these exercises a waste of time, for lack of a better word. They've got other things they need to do. They think, they're not saying this. You can just tell in their body language and their actions, that sort of thing. And so I always try to make the tabletops that we script every year. I try to make them interesting and fun to an extent. I mean, how fun can you make these things? But
everybody comes in costume, I mean.
Yeah. We've had people get killed off before, so it's just like, because who's going to die? And then people want to volunteer. I want to die so I don't have to do this. What is generally, from your perspective, if you can, what's your student feedback with the tabletop exercise? Do they enjoy it?
They like them. They get pretty chatty sometimes during them, and they like to be involved, because I think it's a game. And right now, as far as the current generation that's coming up, likes gamified things. They like to have that type of interaction because they've grown up playing video games. There's a large crossover between people that come into cyber and people that play video games. We even have an esports team at the school, and it's like, wow, these, whenever we were kids, our parents were like, hey, don't play video games, go outside. Now they're like, hey, get from outside back inside, start working on your video gaming, get paid for.
The money is not coming from a kid being an athlete. It's coming from a kid getting into cyber nowadays. It's like, so I guess maybe that's where the parents might be pushing them. I don't know.
Yeah, but they like the game aspect of it. And, Dungeons and Dragons is a popular game. And it's like, hey, this is kind of like we're leveling up our characters. I will even say that we're going to level up our characters here with this particular aspect. And I think that resonates.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. But there's got to be a lot of stress involved with doing all that. I know that from my days of being an adjunct that it can be a little bit stressful at times, teaching. All jobs have stress, but certainly also in cyber as well. And I think we've got a serious problem in our field that people are not handling stress well. And so what I try to do on the podcast is I try to encourage folks through example that they need to think about the necessity of stepping away from that stress and doing something else, kind of to get you back to the balance. What's one of the things you do to get away from the stresses?
Yeah, great question. And that's something that I preach as well. It's like, your life is not on a screen. You wake up in the morning, you look at a screen, you're at work all day, you look at a screen. Last thing you do is look at a screen. So for me to unplug it, it's getting out. It's I live right outside of Philadelphia, about a 10-minute train ride. I get down to Philadelphia. I walk around to some, we're blessed with historical sites. You can walk past all kinds of historical stuff and just walk around and just be analog for a little bit and just look around. And anytime you can spend outside, if you could take a forest bath, if you have like a woods or anything, just walk in the woods. Remember, everybody, I think, as a kid, you just love being in the woods. There's a reason for that. It feels good for our bodies. It's good to be close to nature. So in our profession, more than any other, I think it's good to have a hobby that is an analog hobby. Music is great as well, but something outside where you're kind of just, you're away from your screens, and it feels refreshing. You feel like you turned it off and turned it back on, in a body sense.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, with the exception of today. Today, woke up, it was 11 degrees, and that's pretty cold here for Tennessee. I don't think I'm going to do any forest bathing anytime today.
Not today, no.
But spring's right around the corner, and yeah, that's one of the things you just love to do. And a lot of times I love doing it solo. It's like you go out, and it's not being antisocial. It's more like taking care of yourself, I think, and having that alone time. Well, awesome stuff. What future plans you got? You've recently gone into teaching full time. Do you see this as you're going to do more of that, or is this like a stop to somewhere else?
No, I've been teaching for about going on 4 years now in person.
Mm-hmm.
Before
Okay.
online, it was probably about 7 years or so. I've been teaching online classes, so I intend to do that for the duration. I think my persona. I think I have a desire, a passion for that, for
Mm-hmm.
teaching people, working with people, helping them get into the field, sending them on their way, and then I love the success stories. Somebody will ping me, a student that I long forgotten about, and hey, whatever you said made a difference. To me, that's valuable. So I want to keep doing that. I do love working with clients. I love that interaction as well. So as I can, incorporate some consulting work as well, I love doing that. I get great value from those relationships. Again, having somebody come back and say, we feel more secure based on what we talked about, or helping people achieve what they want to achieve, helping people accomplish their goals is something that is very important to me.
I certainly appreciate the passion in teaching. I sometimes think that and maybe we don't have enough passion in the cybersecurity teaching arena, if you will, and that's really I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but it is the future. And I guess as I've gone through my career, I've become more and more concerned about what are we leaving? What are we leaving for the next round? And I think that, yes, giving back and certainly being passionate about teaching folks, really appreciate the fact that you're doing that for all of your students.
Oh, thanks. And well, even what you do here with the podcast, this is something that I think you give back to industry, and people hopefully can hear these things and pick up a nugget or two that's going to help their business. And it really is, it's a good feeling, and, you asked about things to do outside of work. I would say volunteer work. That's one of the most valuable things that I have found, that I feel really good after having a conversation with somebody. And it's like, it brightens my day, even if I'm having a bad day. If I'm having a bad day, I try to help somebody do something, and it kind of takes my mind off of my bad day, and hopefully helps them out a little bit too.
Yeah, and you realize when you do that you have so much to give, and the only thing I'm thinking about is that just a very quick story. I saw a post online of somebody that was they were scammed by an online mentoring service and was scammed out of like $500 or $1,000 and what have you. And I hate that sort of thing. And so I reached out to them and said basically, hey, if you want to chat, this is not a scam or anything. I don't like the fact that our industry is doing this. I'm happy you can happily use me as a resource. But the reason why I bring this up is that I was very pleased to see that a lot of people offered to do that, to volunteer to help with them. And in fact, somebody, it wasn't me, but somebody, as the person later said, actually went in and sponsored their part of the mentoring was to get them ready for one of the security certifications. So they sponsored the security certification test. So they ended up not being out any money when all was said and done. And that's what I love to see about the community coming together. We've got a great community in information security. It is only marred by a few folks out there that tend to take away from it. So
we do. It's people helping people at the end of the day. You want to talk about a legacy, people remember people that help them, and people that do the helping feel good. And it brings everybody together. And you are right. We have an awesome community. And there's always some bumps, but I think our community is great. And I would say anybody that has, want to get into the industry, reach out, reach out to people in the industry, reach out to us. Always happy to have conversations and get you, figure out what you need to do.
Absolutely.
Still got to put in the work, but
absolutely.
We'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah. If it was easy, everybody would do that. What is that from? A League of Their Own? Tom Hanks,
yeah,
I think.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking your time out to help me and to help us learn a little bit more from the academic side, and also from the SMB side about threats and information security. Really appreciate you taking your time this morning.
Oh, my pleasure. I really appreciate you having me.
And everybody, stay secure.